Welcome, everyone. Welcome back. We're super excited. I'm Neil Horan, the Director of the Center of Excellence for Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation. And we're really excited to have you back. I hope folks got to hear Eva this morning, just kicking us off, and then went to these sessions. I know I sat in on one of the sessions. It was fantastic. I'm legally required to say that, but it actually was it was fantastic. We're really excited to talk a bit here about where we see infant and early childhood mental health consultation being right now. So we have a little bit of PowerPoint, a little bit of video, and a lot of experts who are here to answer questions. So you can already see that when they let an idiot like me in charge, he writes state of the state and then realizes quickly, well, that's not even right. So this is a sort of the state of the state, the state of the community, state of the tribal nation and territory from our perspective, from the Center of Excellence for Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation. I want to just talk through a little bit about where we see the field. Hopefully you've noticed the logo, growth, advancement, and impact. That's what we're funded to do by the generosity of Substance Abuse Mental Health Service Administration. We are super excited. Lauren Rabinovitz, who directs the center, is joining me. I'm going to turn it over to Lauren because we're really pumped. We have a brand new, we like to mix things up, have a little bit of media. So we're going to have Lauren introduce a brand new video that we're just getting out the door today.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Neil. Thank you everyone for joining us for this session, for the few sessions we've already had. I think that just the energy, the enthusiasm, it is all palpable and it is incredibly exciting. So for this video, I really feel very, very honored and excited to present it to you all. It really doesn't need any introduction. It's so phenomenal. It speaks for itself, but I do want to let you know that the voices that you hear in this video, it's a real mental health consultant who works in the San Francisco's infant parent program, daycare consultants program. It's a real director from an early care and education center. So this is, we're always trying to be as true to the field as possible. So I did want to say that this is all very real, and hope you enjoy it. So we're going to play this short video for you and then get to everything else.
My name is Andrea Scott, and I am an infant mental health consultant.
My name is Michelle Freeman. I've worked at Compass Children's Center for close to 14 years. I remember when we first met her, the teachers, they had lots of questions, where she was from, who were her parents, what area. So they really wanted just to make sure she kind of connected with the families that we serve.
One of the things about mental health consultation is that we really focus on the relationships. And so being able just to go in and just sit with them and to say, I'm present with you as you're doing your work, was my way. You're really looking at what the teachers are noticing about how the environment is set up that supports or dysregulates the children. And so during COVID, there were a lot of changes.
We needed a larger space, so we had to move the children into the gross motor room.
That classroom had sinks that were geared towards older children. So it was really difficult for the little ones to wash their hands. Teachers were wearing masks. There was an incredible amount of cleaning toys.
So there was a lot of stress. And, Andrea came in and she really listened to the needs of the teachers. By having a relationship with me and having a relationship with the program director, she was able to, just be another voice for the teachers, being able to convey what they needed and why. I cannot imagine not having a mental health consultation. I don't know what it was like before. But whatever it was like before, I don't want to go back, right?
Okay, not to get too hokey, but that it always touches me when we see these, and hopefully you see how we take what Eva talked about and what you've heard in some of the sessions already and see it in real life. And this is a program, and we have Khadijah Johnson joining us in our town hall here in a few minutes. This is the work that's happening out there. So I want to spend just a few minutes, Lauren and I, talking about where we've been, what our center has been doing for the last few years. I don't know, but Lauren told me, so I'll talk about it. A little bit about where we're going, and then we really want to have you all ask the questions that you want to ask of our team. So we'll have a little town hall discussion with them. So next slide, please. So I didn't realize this until my daughter pointed out, I'm old, so I get to talk about the history. I don't actually talk about anything that's happening now. I talk about, Roxanne Kaufman back in the day got money from Gail Ritchie, and then Jen Oppenheim and Melinda Baldwin and others at SAMHSA, and all the folks, Mary McCrane and Liz Bissio and Jordana Ash and Allison Steyer and Khadijah Johnson and Sherry, all these folks who've been doing this work for oh so long. There's a history to this field. And for those who've been around, these folks, you get super excited, you see them. So, oh, Khadijah's gonna say something. Oh, Allison was talking this afternoon with Mary Margaret Gleason. Let me just talk you through the history just real quick and just sort of say, this is a pretty nascent field. If you go back to sort of Gerald Kaplan back in the 1970s, shortly after Head Start was established, that's not that long ago. I like to point that out because then it makes me feel a little bit better. In the next piece, it's a little clunky, but if we click through it, you'll sort of see the next sort of piece of our timeline once Samir is able to click on it, is around 2005 things. In 2000, we had a monograph about infant and early childhood mental health consultation, a training guide that Roxanne Kaufman and others developed. And then Walter, who you'll hear from tomorrow, I like to pretend we're friends, so instead of calling him Dr. Gilliam, but Walter Gilliam came out with a study about expulsion that sort of really took everybody aback around, oh my God, we are having young children expelled from early care and education. Deb Perry and others at Georgetown came out with an evaluation toolkit. And then as we click, you'll see that things really started to move. We had a research synthesis where people started from Portland State and at Georgetown and other places started looking at what research was being done. And then in 2008, Substance Abuse Mental Health Service Administration really started to put money behind these efforts. Project Launch started. Many of you, I've seen some of my friends from Project Launch grant sites here on, and iLaunch grant sites here on the conference. In 2009, Georgetown published a study that looked at 6 of the best programs out in the country, not the only 6, but 6 of the best, and sort of started pushing the field forward. And as you'll see, as we keep clicking, there's another policy report that came out, and then a joint policy statement that came out of US Health and Human Services. So things have really been moving very quickly. Is that my doorbell, Lauren, that says you better be done soon. So then in 2015, SAMHSA under Jen Oppenheim's leadership funded the first iteration of this Center of Excellence. And that really was in partnership with other federal agencies. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention folks like Sangeeta Parikshak and Marco Beltran, David Willis, who was at HRSA, and Dina Lisa, who followed, Melissa Brodowski, a whole number of federal folks who really have supported the movement of this. And then in 2019, this second iteration, which is where we are now, and I think every time I say something smart, a bell rings. So then 2019, unless I'm the only one hearing a bell, and then I probably should go to the doctor. Then 2019 is when this phase started. Okay, so next slide. So one of the things that we've learned, we've worked with any number of states, and that is the correct answer. And so then when we've been working with states, tribal nations, territories, and a whole host of programs and community level folks, we're learning that there's a wide spectrum of where folks are at. They're trying to develop their workforce. We're trying to deliver mental health consultation places that really don't have access to the level of mental health professionals that we really would hope everyone has access to. So the workforce development issue, we're really working on finance issues. And then obviously in our research and evaluation team, Dr. Deborah Perry, Dr. Andy Davis, Kayla Titus has really sort of generated a tremendous amount of work that Lauren will speak to, because we know that there's a real need about how do we evaluate the effectiveness of our mental health consultation program. So these are the kinds of things that we're learning. The other pieces you'll see on the next slide is really about the larger system. So we also are connected to all the other work that's happening in preschool development grants, the PDG birth to 5 work, in the early childhood comprehensive systems grants out of HRSA, where we know that in a larger system, mental health consultation is about one mental health service that sits within a wide range of services that are hopefully available for children and families. We're also learning a lot about the gaps in places where because there's not a dedicated funding stream, states and tribes and territories and communities have to be really creative about how they not only build a program, but then sustain it. And our folks who have infant and early childhood mental health grants from SAMHSA, Project Launch grants, the ECCS, PDG, B2 all of those folks are starting to learn all of the ins and outs of financing and policy, because you have to if you're going to sustain this without that dedicated funding stream. So we're really learning a lot of this in our work in terms of technical assistance, and Lauren will talk about this, but also in terms of what we need to develop in terms of products and resources for folks. So next slide, please. Because I want to turn it over to Lauren, who really, I'd be remiss if I didn't use this conference as an opportunity to thank Lauren for all the work she's done in leading the center, and then our team, Sumia and Malkisha, and in particular, Crystal, who we will mention any number of times, who's really not only put this conference on, but is our project coordinator and moves this center forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Lauren and talk us through a little bit about the kinds of things we've been doing over the last few years.
Well, thank you so much, Neil. And it's also a little bit scary because I literally wrote myself a note to say exactly what you just said. So our brains are really well aligned and makes me slightly nervous, but all joking aside. So hopefully you have had a chance to explore our website. You will see that we have all of our resources generally chunked into these 5 different areas of mental health consultation. Program infrastructure, sometimes we call it programs and models. We are still going back and forth with exactly what is the best way to encapsulate all of that information. Equity, of course, research and evaluation, workforce, policy and financing. We would never suggest that these are 5 distinct, mutually exclusive areas. Mental health consultation, as you all know, is multi-layered. There are so many different levels of influence. All of this does very much fit together, and there are different components that bear separating out. So this is how we have things organized. This is how we have attempted to help move this field forward. Next slide, please. So here on this slide, you see just a few highlighted resources. We have so many. I could easily spend the rest of the day discussing resources that we have. We are so proud of all of these. I pulled just a few out, ones we really do want to make sure you have heard about, are able to access, download, spend some time with. Our updated competencies, consultant assessment. We have a phenomenal equity toolkit. We have a program planning readiness tool. This one is a just giving you an appetizer sneak peek. It's coming soon, very soon. We have sustainability learning modules. We have a research and evaluation toolkit. This is literally just a very high level snapshot. We'll go ahead and put our link in the chat for all of our resources. Please do take some time to explore. Next slide, please. Another piece of work that our center takes really seriously, and certainly this conference is probably the pinnacle of this, but our commitment to having opportunities for you all to learn together, to learn from each other. This is such a dynamic field. It is moving so quickly, and you all are leaders in this field, and we want to bring you together in as many ways as possible. Lots of you have had the opportunity to participate in our ECHO groups. We've had our equity chat series. The last one for this year is actually going to be happening on Wednesday of this conference. obviously technical assistance. I'll talk about that just a teeny bit more on the next slide. We have our virtual community. Please, please, please do join that. We are brainstorming lots of ways to make that even more dynamic for you all. And there was one other piece that I don't remember now, so I'm going to go on to this TA slide. So this is, I mean, really very, very exciting for us. We are just about to end our 3rd year, which is truly remarkable. And over these 3 years, we have been able to support 74 different infant and early childhood mental health consultation programs at the state, local, tribal, and territorial level. And I'm just going to stop for a moment just to acknowledge that. That's a really big deal. That there are so many programs, and that's just a snippet of all that is all the work that's going on out there. As Neil had said, we support Project Launch, iLaunch grantees, infant and early childhood mental health grantees. I mean, it's a really long list. We partner with other TA centers, and I truly think that is some of the richest work that we do is in that partnering. So there's our link again, but if nothing else, I really want you to pay attention to this 4th bullet that we have here. This is how and why we create our resources. Everything we do is based on what we learn through our partnerships, through the opportunities we have to engage in technical assistance relationships with you all. And so we are just really grateful to have this conference, to have this session in particular. We're going to bring up all of not all, just a handful of our amazing Center of Excellence faculty to talk through some questions and talk through some of the, just kind of the issues that we're all grappling with. I was lucky enough to moderate a session just before this with the Maryland Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation Program. And we had such rich discussion around issues of workforce, of equity, of the different evaluation tools, and I could go on and on. But I am not going to go to our next slide, and we are going to simultaneously bring all of our folks in so we can see each other. I'm going to invite you all to put questions into the Q&A. What do you want to hear about? What do you want to have us kind of chat with each other about? What are the burning questions on your mind? What are challenges? What are things that you'd like us to talk about that's going well? Sometimes I think we get a little stuck in things that aren't going well. There's also lots of great things to celebrate. So we're going to take a look at some of these questions. We are going to get all of our folks together. Neil's going to do a quick introduction. And I will just repeat, as the technology is doing that, to really thank our back-end team. There are so many individuals behind the scenes and have been for months and months and months to get this conference to where it is today. So a huge, huge thank you to everyone that you're seeing and those that you are not.
Thanks, Lauren. So as folks are putting questions in, I just want to just introduce you quickly. This is not our whole team, but this is part of our team. So, if somebody would just write a book about mental health consultation, it would be, oh, that's right, somebody did. Many people have, but when we talk about the book, it's Khadijah. So what did we do? We said, Khadijah, would you join our faculty? So Khadijah Johnson, who formerly, as many of you know, was running a program out in San Francisco, is part of our faculty here at the Center of Excellence, part of our Georgetown faculty as well. Lauren, who I think folks have met, is with us. As we thought about how do we construct the faculty for this Center of Excellence, we also wanted to bring in folks who've been out there doing this work. So Khadijah, we have Sherry Heller from Tulane. We have a couple folks from Tulane, but Sherry's joining us today. We're really excited. And then in order to really address the kinds of things that we feel like need to be addressed, particularly given the work that we're doing, we've brought in Don Yazzie, who's part of our Georgetown faculty, and Don leads a number of our efforts. And you've probably seen a lot of the work that Don's been doing in terms of not just working with tribal nations, but really helping us think about how do we address equity in the largest sense of the word. Annie Davis, as I mentioned, is part of our Georgetown faculty, and you did a great job this morning, and I really appreciated the way that we started this conference. I saw a lot of people did too. Annie co-leading the evaluation work with Deborah Perry. And then your favorite of mine, Lisa Gordon from Children's Equity Project at Arizona State. Lisa's really been co-leading a lot of our equity work, our equity chats and other sorts of pieces, along with Dawn, Chantel Meek from Children's Equity Project and others. So we're here if there are some questions. Lauren, I'm assuming we have some questions. So where do we want to start?
Yeah, we already have some questions. The first one is probably one of the hardest. So I am, part of me wants to skip it and part of me thinks we should ask this question.
We're Georgetown, we take the hard stuff. Let's go.
Let's go for it. I'm going to read this great question because it touches on virtually everything. I think everyone has something to comment in some way. How many consultants should an agency that serves over 1,500 children have?
Oh, that's good. I like that.
It's a workforce question. It's a research and evaluation question. It's an equity question. It is a sustainability question. It is literally one question that I think touches on every aspect of what it means to do consultation.
So I wonder though, if we want to start from the broadest sense with maybe Sherry or Khadijah or both want to take sort of as folks who sort of think about it from a programmatic level, and then let's talk about some of the other pieces, maybe Annie from an evaluation. Is that, I mean, I would say, I'm sorry for putting you on the spot, but that's essentially what a town hall is. So who wants to take that? No one taking themselves.
I'll give it a shot. I'll give it a shot. I don't think there's an easy answer.
Yeah.
I think one, it would help to know what the agency is. I think we think about consultant caseload, which I think is an important question based on the setting where you're providing the services. So if you're providing the services to childcare programs, we look at the size of the childcare program to help determine caseload. For example, in our program in Louisiana, consultants are going to carry so many small centers and so many large centers. It depends on the dose. Our consultants are going in, every other week. And so you have to realistically think, what can somebody get done in 40 hours? Whereas with a home visiting program, you're looking at the caseload a home visitor has, and then the consultant's going to serve so many of those home visitors, right? And you're also thinking about it at the programmatic level. So I think that's a great question. I think there's more information to be gathered and more questions to be asked. So what I find myself doing is asking more questions about the program. So, call our TA services. They're free. Get on the and we'll TA with you and ask you those questions and help you think of a answer that's going to work for you in your region or community and its needs.
I love the answer. I love the shameless plug for the center as well. Khadijah, anything you want to add or?
I was never good at math problems. So this idea of if you have this many consultants and this many centers, it made me a little nervous at the beginning, but I realized it's a mental health consultation question that allowed me to feel like I might have something to contribute, although Sherry said all of the factors that one would need to consider. And I would only add to the list that Sherry talked about a couple of things. And one is asking the entity, whether, as Sherry said, that's a child care program, a home visiting program, a domestic violence shelter, a primary care facility, what they perceive as their needs, that we, in some way, whether formal or informal, begin with a needs assessment and an idea of what the center's goals are, and that our intensity and duration, we hope, is responsive to the needs of particular programs, that we don't have a formulaic way of proceeding, but rather that we have parameters for both dosage and duration, but that we're responsive to the needs of the programs in which we provide services and with whom we partner. The other I would say is that we're also wanting to always be thinking about what space do we leave, do we intentionally have to support mental health consultants. So when we're thinking about how much service they provide, hopefully we're also incorporating ideas about ongoing training and supervision, and that we make space and allow resources, both monetary and time, resources for reflection for mental health consultants. All of that goes into kind of the equation, the alchemy of coming up with how many people can be served.
Yeah, I like that alchemy word, Khadija, because it does suggest it's not sort of an exact science. This is my rudimentary understanding of alchemy, but super helpful. And it's sort of, in some ways, it makes me think about this other question that somebody asked, which is around what ideas do folks have about using the pandemic and post-pandemic, sort of in quotes, such as displacement and death and trauma in an ethical way. I appreciate that you put that in there, to sort of highlight the current and future needs of the work, almost like a cudgel. I don't know what a cudgel is, but it feels like cudgel would be the word to use. And then Lauren will text me that cudgel doesn't mean what I think it means, but that's okay. But almost to use this like as a tool to help people say, yeah, we should do this more. And I'm wondering, Dawn, Lisa, any thoughts about this? As maybe this is one way in which to sort of shift a bit?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in and hope you can hear me clearly. I've had unstable internet for a little while, but I think I really like to think about, anything that comes with a challenge, anything that is hard, there's always an opportunity. And I think as mental health consultants, we are trained to find opportunities within the challenges.
Yeah, that's really powerful, Dawn, and loved how you said that. That's what we're trained to do, right? Leaning in when others might lean out. And I think, when we think about the pandemic and how it really has been quite a reckoning for all of us, right? We've learned a lot. How can we take what we've learned and continue to build on it? We've learned of great disparity, that in time of pandemic and time of struggle, how the inequities that exist in the communities that we serve are even that much more heightened. And so understanding those inequities, we understand that it's not just in the children and the families that we serve, but our staff who've experienced some of these, some of the struggles, and we all have in a sense. But when we think of communities that have been historically marginalized, and communities of color, tribal communities, how are we really thinking intentionally about what we've learned through this pandemic and being able then to be mindful in the kind of services and the kind of processes that we put in place for times of reflection, reflective supervision, to hold space for that with our staff, our consultants, right, our consultees as well. But I think it offers up that opportunity to really be intentional. I think that the word is intentionality as to what we're doing when we're thinking about this space.
Lisa, just teeing it up for this next question about sort of what are some of the new things to think about regarding equity and reflective supervision. So I don't know, Lisa, if you want to hop in first, or Sherry, do you want to hop? This is sort of Sherry's.
Yeah. Well, I was really, if it's okay, can I keep going, Neil? I'm gonna, I'm still, Khadija, I'm still thinking you on that math problem there, because alchemy, I'm trying to, but really, I was so excited to see that question pop up, because I think one of the things that we are starting to see, and that's really being a framing that's helping to be more intentional, again, the intentionality with this work, is to think about what is it that we really are, what is it? And I think we talk about it like, who do we serve? For whom are we serving? And when we think of equity, what is that? How is that named and elevated in our service agreements? How do we communicate that to those who we serve in terms of what it is that we do in infant and early childhood mental health? It's not just about addressing and being reactive, right, to concerns of behavior and social emotional needs of children and families. But it's so many other pieces that we look at when we think about all of the competencies and the programmatic consultation and system-wide consultation, and thinking of all the issues that relate to equity. How do we let folks know that this is what we do? So what we found is many programs are starting to build in to memorandums of understanding or service agreements that say, hey, this is what we do. Equity, and letting folks know this is a part of what we do. This is embedded in the service that we will be providing to you. And how can we partner with you and learn alongside of you to ensure that we're creating equitable experiences, access and outcomes for the children and families that you serve. So I think I want to elevate that piece as one that I think is something new when we're thinking about reflective supervision, when we're thinking about how we communicate exactly what we do for those who we serve.
Great, thanks, Lisa. Just a great sort of thought-provoking questions. I can imagine folks going back to their program and sort of saying, I heard this and I wonder what you guys think, kind of thing. Sherry, do you want to throw in a little bit more given your expertise in reflective supervision?
Yeah, thank you, Neil. There were like a million ideas popping into my head. And I think just, something that I want to highlight in what Lisa, and she's talking about infusing it in the agreements and how we are with our consultees, that we really need to think of it from a level of reflective practice in that our consultation program is infusing that equity at all levels. So helping the consultants figure out where they are in that whole intersectionality, the self-awareness that Eva talked about at the very beginning. We need to enhance our own self-awareness and where we are to enhance our own confidence to then be that consultant that goes out there and makes those differences that Eva highlighted. And so we need to find a space in reflective supervision. That's one component that you can do it. There's, I'll highlight another program that I work with. It's the Reflective Supervision Collaborative that's housed at Southwest Human Development. Khadija is one of the faculty members on it. And they really worked toward creating a new framework of reflective supervision in which specifically diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as social justice and trauma-informed thinking is infused throughout the model. So you can check that out on Southwest Human Development's webpage. There's starting to be a lot of writing and a lot of thinking on how to be more intentional as a supervisor or a supervisee in reflective supervision and infusing equity throughout. And hopefully you'll start seeing some products from us that are thinking about reflective supervision and equity and consultation in the near future.
Cool, more work for us. Thanks, Sherry. Yeah, and I'm not gonna even call it shameless anymore, just plugs. I mean, I think that's part of what we want to do at this conference is Leah, I think Leah's doing a session, Leah Eckley from Southwest Human Development, Don Yazzie from Southwest Human Development, Allison Steyer, I'm not sure if Allison's presenting, but I know Leah is. Let's plug away. Let's plug all those great resources that are out there. I loved how much Eva sort of threw out there for folks. And I wish, given the next question, that we had just the resource for, but this next question, Annie, I'm gonna come to you. My friend Annie, who may not be my friend because it's a hard question. What have we learned about dosage? There's a question we get a lot, like how often do we need to go? Like, do we go once a week? Have we learned anything about dosage for effectiveness of infant and early childhood mental health consultation? So, Annie, I'm gonna let you take first shot, and then if others want to sort of join in, and we have folks like Dawn who actually is actively doing consultation, so we can sort of come to you after. But Annie, why don't you take this one first, please?
Sure. Thanks, Neil, for the softball question. And I will certainly defer to my colleagues, but I'll just speak to the data perspective. So when we think about dosage, what does that even mean? There's how often you go to a center, there's how long you stay, how many months, weeks, years you are there, and with whom are you working? So this is consultation. Oftentimes you're not just meeting with one person. There might be, in the case of ECE, a teacher, a parent, a director. So it's been really complicated, and my team has really done our best to try and unpack this for you all and package something up to say, here's what it is, definitively. Hasn't happened yet, never say never. We've shifted more lately to focusing on what are the essential activities to define providing mental health consultation. That's part of an ongoing project that we're working on, as well as a session we'll be leading tomorrow. More shameless plugs. In the meantime, of course, there are lots of great articles, a lot of great studies out there about mental health consultation, where they show change from before consultation to after or during consultation. So just in that, you see, in order to get to significant outcomes, there is a certain amount of time it takes. So there are a few studies that have found some child level outcomes after a really brief intervention, around 2 months. However, when we begin to unpack some of those other constructs, like building a strong relationship between consultant and consultee, changing the way that consultees are thinking and feeling and being in their relationships with children and families, we've seen those come on board more around 6 months or longer. Again, that there are sort of frequency and with home considerations within that. I'll also mention the recent study from Eva Marie Shivers and her colleagues, which found in a sample from Arizona, a closing of a disparity in teacher-child conflict between Black and white children, that was present, that there was a closing of disparity after 6 months, and then a reversal of the disparity after only in the case of getting to 12 months of consultation. So for the work that can be more and more relationship-based, it takes longer. And I'll leave it there and turn it over to my colleagues who'd like to weigh in.
Okay, colleagues, anybody want to throw, is there anything else, folks? That's pretty decent answer, right? Like, I mean, I don't know that we have an answer. It's another alchemy thing. I'm going to just use alchemy and cudgel a couple more times, Khadija. Anybody want to throw in on this? On this dosage?
Well, I
question?
want to underscore what you said, Emmy, and that is, I hope that we're at a place in our subspecialty, as I refer to it, where we're thinking about what for whom, that dosage might be determined by thinking about who needs what for what outcomes. And I really want to underscore what you said about, while what's encouraging is that almost regardless of duration or dosage, we've found salutary positive impacts of infant and early childhood mental health consultation. And at the same time, toward what purpose or end. And when we say that mental health consultation is primarily a capacity building endeavor, capacity of the adults in children's lives to be better able to serve both the children in immediate care and those in the future, because when you build internal capacity, it lasts beyond the time that the mental health consultant is partnering with the consultee. So that thinking about what does it take to make internal change in the capacity for reflection, in the capacity to examine our biases and to bring about racial equity and healing. We all know that internal change takes both self-reflection, a relational stance, and a matter of time. So wanting to be able to examine what our goals are and what it takes to get to those goals.
It's again, I love this team because they just line up these segues, because that makes me think, Dawn, we've got a question here that I think we've continuously been trying to address. And I like the way that this question is framed. What advice do you have for consultants beginning work with tribal nations? What would you share as the key considerations for infant and early childhood mental health consultants entering work with tribal communities? I know we're going to be on a fantastic panel. I'm not going to really be on, I'm just going to stand next to you guys and listen, but you're going to be on a fantastic panel. But any sort of thoughts about what are some ways for folks to start in this work?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to answer the question the best way that I can, but I guess I'll lead off of what Khadija just shared about, what needs to be there to support internal change in our consultees. And I think that's a big part of, when reaching out to tribal communities is, really having that genuine and curious, wondering with stance. That's so important, to keep in mind in the consultative stance. And really finding someone, there is a PDF on our website that talks about, welcoming a mental health consultant that's new to your tribal community. And in that document, it does state, it's going to be helpful to partner with someone who is of the community to, they're cultural, from, I guess, a cultural insider, or someone who's of the community that you can partner with, so that you get to know, what is the history of that tribal community, and what do they want you to know? So really all of those. Another thing to keep in mind, just highlighting what Lisa shared earlier about the intentionality of documents, the intentionality of agreements. So knowing that tribes do have a special legal status within this country, there does have to be some documents, some paperwork, whether it's an MOA, some type of agreement, and really carefully thinking through, what the services will look like, what's going to be included, and you're just making sure that cultural considerations are always a part of those conversations. And context, historical context is so important within tribal communities. So I think those would be some things, but just, humility. There will be some videos that are coming out on our website. We did interview some consultants who were non-native and came to tribal communities. And the thing that came out is just having humility and having a willingness to be open and to learn. So I'll share that much.
Super helpful, Dawn.
And Dawn, we put some of the link in the chat for some of those resources.
So I'm going to shift us just a little bit, because there's been this pandemic thing that people are talking about. I've heard about it. I just sit in this room all day on Zoom. So there's probably 10 different ways in which to get at it. So let's just start with this, and y'all can sort of jump in as you see fit. The pandemic has exacerbated the early childhood workforce crisis. How does the center support the mental health needs of the workforce? My center doesn't do home visits right now. And how would you recommend getting into implementing home visits? As a consultant doing all the work via Zoom, I'm wondering about your thoughts regarding how consultation work is impacted by virtual services in terms of limitations in building relationships. But then we also hear the flip side from folks of, is this maybe the new way we get to do consultation? Maybe we get to reach more people. So I don't know who, Khadijah, you want to take first crack at this, and then folks, then you get to gather your thoughts. So I get to put Khadijah a little bit more on the spot.
All right. Sure. I think one of the things, obviously, about what I refer to as the dual pandemics, I think you brought that up, Lisa, is that in addition to the global health crisis, the last few years have exposed and exacerbated the racial inequities that have been longstanding, and that both have been not only highlighted, but hopefully we've all begun in early childhood mental health consultation to think about how we address both of those situations more explicitly and intentionally. And I think about that it's really shifted our practice in many ways, both in what I call the contours or the shape of our practice, meaning that we have learned that we can provide services remotely, but also in many ways the content of our practice. So there's changes at the contour and content levels. And I think, as you just said, Neil, in terms of learning, and I would have been the last one as a true Luddite to think that you could provide relationship focused, intimate services remotely, and yet I'm a believer. I'm convinced that what it has done is has created opportunities for us to reach, as you said, especially rural communities tribal nations that maybe we wouldn't have been able to be in contact with, and surely not in as regular a way. It doesn't mean to ignore the limitations of a remote connection, but to, as you said, Don, capitalize on the opportunities of this modality. And I think we'll continue to learn more about, there are some colleagues in various places, including in Louisiana at the TIKES program, who figured out ways to do beautiful observations of children through virtual means. So I think we'll keep informing each other about the shape that it can take. I also think it's important to talk about the initial question that we had to come back to, like in what other ways has it shaped the content of our practice, to think about the losses and the ways in which the workforce, particularly the early childhood education workforce, has been depleted, in some ways demoralized, exhausted. Not that we all aren't, but in particular ways, a workforce that already there are so many disparities. That workforce of more than 40% women of color who already were making less than their counterparts in higher education have suffered extreme hardship. And the one way, not to diminish that hardship, but the one way that, again, with Dawn's idea of an opportunity, what I think has happened is a leavening and a destigmatizing of mental health services. That what seems possible is that we all have a lot more understanding and empathy for the need for support, not just for one workforce or another, but the idea that mental health services, if we think about them as proactive promoters of well-being, rather than simply as something to do with mental illness, we've, I think, as a society, hopefully, come to see the greater applicability. And I think that will allow for mental health consultation services to be more readily engaged with on behalf of, again, the adults in children's lives, that the focus can be on how do we support adults so adults can in turn support children best.
Yeah, Khadijah reminds me of when the pandemic started. Jen Oppenheim, who was our project officer at SAMHSA funding the center, said to me, if you're in the lane of being a mental health consultant, now's the time to get back on the highway of mental health. You're a mental health person. We need to provide mental health support. I know I have long conversations with lots of folks across the country. Valerie Alloy in Ohio, I know Ohio had a presentation this morning. You know, she and I talked a lot about the shifts. Allison down in Louisiana in the TIKES program, we talked about the shifts that everybody had to make. And so Annie, I'm wondering, anything that you wanna sort of add to that, or Lauren? I haven't even given Lauren a chance because she's so busy looking at questions. Maybe Lauren, you want to jump in here before Annie and save Annie from just getting more upset with me? Anything you want to add, Lauren?
Well, what I want to add is I was having a planning call with Dr. Gilliam maybe 6 weeks ago, and we were talking about the conference, and it just sort of dawned on us at the same moment, wow, it's going to be happening almost exactly 2 years after the pandemic started. We certainly didn't plan it that way, but we both just stopped for a moment and paused and just said, wow. And I'm sure we've all seen so many different bits of information on social media, and almost joking, if we knew how long we would be in this situation back then, would we have made some different decisions and whatnot. But I do think it is worth repeating, sort of exactly what you were just sharing, Neil, about what Jen Oppenheim had said to us. And it did and continues, unfortunately, to create an opportunity and to open up dialogue and ways to have conversations in a manner that I don't know that we were quite ready for before this all began. So there is that one, there is that element of, okay, maybe that is something positive that came out of this, that we need to continue to harness that energy and that acknowledgement that there is no one that is in such a luxurious position to say, I don't need to think about mental health. It really, to me, it just really opened this window that it is something that is needs to be in all of our worldview, And then we need to go much deeper in being very concrete that this was not everyone in the same storm. We were all in very different ships with extraordinarily different circumstances that did not make this one pandemic, but really, lack of a better expression, pulled back that curtain, as Khadija was saying.
So I have no idea how to segue from a ship thing, but I'm going to try. So because I've seen this a couple times here, and it's something we think about a lot. If I think about where we started, folks like Liz Bissio in Connecticut, and Khadija in San Francisco, and Jordana, it was really in early care and education. And we see more and more folks trying to figure out, well, where else are we going to do this? And there was a great presentation by some of the Louisiana folks, Dr. Mary Margaret Gleason and other folks who are doing some great work. What are folks asking? Because one of the questions is about how do we get into home visiting, but any thoughts from all of you about ways people need to be thinking about, well, we are already doing this, or no, we really think our best opportunity is to start in early intervention or home visiting or some other sector in the early childhood system. Any thoughts about where folks should be looking, considerations about what might be the same or different? That's more softball-y, Annie, I think. That's in everybody's wheelhouse.
Did you call on someone, Neil?
I would never call on anyone. It's not my, I just leave it.
Okay, I thought I heard my name.
Khadija, any thoughts on that? You call me Captain Smooth.
So I in the program in San Francisco that you heard Andrea Scott speak from, and of which I was the past director for a few decades, we did start in early childhood education, but very quickly, with the support of a collaboration of funders who also saw that early childhood mental health consultations impact and efficacy was not limited to early childhood education. We spread to the range of venues in which families prenatally through their children's 5th birthday, where they reside and where they are cared for. So the range including domestic violence and homeless shelters, about which Andrea, myself, and others at the Infant Parent Program wrote articles about that work in homeless shelters and domestic violence shelters in a 0 to 3 article a couple of years ago. And I know my colleagues will have the link in the chat before I can even remember the title of it. But also in residential substance abuse programs, and the reason, and primary care and community doula programs. So the couple of points that I wanted to make is, one is that I think that this is an intervention with wide applicability. But the other point that I wanted to make was, I think about those parts of systems and settings where, by virtue of what their purpose is, meaning domestic violence, homeless shelters, substance abuse treatment facilities, child welfare, where what we know is that the families involved in those systems have suffered from some trauma or difficulty. That means that there is likely a need for those who are surrounding them in care to be supported. And while, of course, early care and education, also there are children and families who've had a variety of injuries, insults, and harms. But wanting to think about, which we don't as much, is our place within settings where there is rife trauma, and that trauma gets extended vicariously to those who work in those settings. And so really, whether wanting to make a plug for an emphasis in settings where we don't typically think of going sometimes, and where often the emphasis is on the adult's traumatic experience, meaning the parent's experience of homelessness or recovery. And yet these are settings where children are the central focus. And yet often staff in those settings don't have support or training to think about the sequelae of trauma, what might be occurring for the babies. And so I love that we had expansion into those particular settings.
Lisa, I'm going to come to you next, because I wonder if there are sort of considerations that folks should have about what some of the implications are, what might make this easier, more challenging, what are some of the equity considerations that folks should have. And Dawn, I'm just giving you fair warning, I'm going to come to you as well, because I think in terms of working within tribal nations, obviously we need to be cognizant of those systems as well. But I'll let Lisa go first and then come to you, Dawn.
Thanks, Neil. And Khadijah, I think you put that so beautifully, because what I was going to share is you can begin by asking yourself the question, who are we serving and who are we not serving, right? Now that we understand, as Khadijah had put, this dual pandemic that we've been through that has really elevated things right before our eyes and that we're aware of, we need to ask ourselves that question. Within that community that you serve, who are you not reaching out to, right? Who is not at the table, and why? And why not? And so it really means that we are starting to really think about how we cultivate partnerships and relationships that cross over into community agencies and other kinds of organizations that are doing community work. It's getting out, it's asking the question, who are the families who you serve? What are their needs? So it requires that we kind of, step out of sometimes what we might consider to be our comfort zones or what seems comfortable, to go out and start to ask the questions. Sometimes it's just about asking the questions, to be thinking differently about who we're serving, who we're not serving and not reaching, and why. So I would lift that up as a starting point. It's easy to get your data about your demographics in the community and where you are and where you serve. But when you take a look at the data and see what's there, and then how are your services aligning with that or misaligning, right? So that's a place I would just say to start. I know for time, I'm also gonna ask Dawn to see, Neil, I'm doing your thing. I'm pitching to Dawn, right? I'm pitching it right over, but we work in concert here. So Dawn, I know you have some thoughts as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think extending into other service areas, I think it would be a dream of mine and maybe many others to have Indian Health Service funding, Bureau of Indian Education funding, juvenile justice funding for tribes. I mean, all of those funds to be able to have budgeted infant and early child mental health consultation dollars. So part of that is us on this end, advocating for, educating. And then the other part of it is on the ground in the infant early child mental health TA center that I'm involved in, hearing from tribal communities on the ground and how they're partnering. What I've heard is they've been leveraging relationships. Maybe someone on their Young Child Wellness Council, their team, they intentionally brought in someone from a county, if they're a tribal community, and from a state office. I would also want the same vice versa. If you're a state, get someone from the tribal community. Sometimes we have, oh, well, so-and-so knows about tribes, they work with tribes, bring them in. Well, let's make sure that they're of the community too, and always have that and, because a lived experience on the ground, whether you're an urban Indian setting or on the reservation setting, it is so important to have that lived experience. So definitely look at who's not there at the table regarding tribal communities. Tribal communities is very challenging. We not only have the federal system to go through, we have the state systems to go through, county systems, and then tribal government systems. So it's like 4 layers of all of these, legal pieces. So definitely be gently persistent in, reaching out. And another tidbit that tribal communities have shared within the work that I'm doing at the TA Center is when they gave something, maybe it's all of these free parent trainings for positive Indian parenting. And then this other program, social services, found out, and then they started referring all of their parents there. So when you give something and build those relationships, then they bring them into the conversation of consultation. So definitely, think of all these ways in leveraging relationships and all the considerations in tribal communities.
I don't find it surprising at all that we end with the word relationships, whether it's within tribal tribal nations or not. I think that that's been this consistent theme. And just so you all know, in the back chat that we're hiding from all of you, I've got people saying, I wish we could keep going. So we're enjoying this, hopefully as much as you are. And Khadijah apparently will be holding town halls for the rest of the year because she's really enjoying it. But we really appreciate the questions. I know, Lauren, we must have gotten to all of them or maybe a 10th of them. So we apologize if we didn't get to your question, but as you've heard, we're here. If folks have questions, the center will continue to be available for answering questions. I want to thank Khadijah, Lauren, Lisa, Dawn, Sherry, and Annie. This is just a snapshot of what kinds of support we have available here at the center, but also just what's reflective of the field, that we have folks who have expertise across a number of areas, as all of you have. And hopefully you're all sharing with one another and seeing this as sort of the opportunity to learn something new because you're just starting out, or to find that little nugget that you're like, ah, that was great. What Eva said this morning, or what I heard in the Maryland session, or the Ohio folks said this, or Dawn said this during the town hall kind of thing, or man, Annie really could help me figure this out. Those are the kinds of things we're hoping you get. We know we're going to send you out to the next part of the conference, but we really appreciate everybody's questions, your interest in all this, and I just gotta say how much I love our team and appreciate y'all. So thanks everybody. Have a good rest of the conference today, and of course tomorrow and Wednesday.